Governor's New Jersey's fiscal health is unstable right now. The state's general obligation bond rating has been downgraded 6 times over the last 4 years. Governor Florio, what do you see as the message Wall Street is sending?
Well, they're saying that you have to get a fiscal house in order. I mean, the shortfalls that have occurred on a fairly regular basis recently are not being coped with. And I think Wall Street is getting a little concerned about sort of the one-shots. That is, the opportunities to do something, take care of a problem, but it's not going to be an ongoing response. There's just be a source of money that comes in and is used, changing dates for when things happen from July to August. Those types of practices are not fiscally really responsible for a long period of time.
The state's bills are coming due. June 30th is the end of the fiscal year. The budget has to be balanced constitutionally, Governor Whitman. But now there's an $800 million shortfall. How serious is this situation?
It's a real challenge. It's a real challenge for the governor and the legislature because the low-hanging fruit has all been picked. And so now you're getting into some very serious balancing acts that you have to go through to figure out where you're going to find this money. As you point out, the budget's got to be balanced. Can't go bonding for everything, especially for operating. You should never do bonding for operating. It should be for capital projects. And when you see the downgrades, that makes bonding more expensive. And I know the legislature and the governor are focusing on it full time. And what they need to do is make sure they put aside partisan differences and really look at what do we do for the state of New Jersey.
What are the consequences in terms of job growth for the state and New Jersey's economy?
It was a double-edged sword because the absence of job growth over the last couple of years results in less revenue coming in. And that means deficits become bigger. So it's a chicken and egg thing, but there's a need for job growth so as to generate revenues, so as to deal with budget consequences.
When the state looks to finance capital projects, whether it's road construction or bridge repair or new buildings for the government, isn't there an obligation, or should there be an obligation, for the state to be looking as to how to pay that bonding back at the time of the planning?
Absolutely. You have to look. You know, the problem we have is that we do annual budgets. And like many states, like most states, we do annual budgets. But if you think about it, the issues that we're facing really require setting out a 5 or 10-year plan. Governor Kane suggested the other day, and I think it's a very good suggestion, that there be a bipartisan commission of the legislature sitting down with the governor's office and perhaps bring in a third-party person to chair it so it really looks bipartisan, to sit down and take a strategic, long-term look at where our priorities need to be and how we are going to face this. Because this is not something that we're going to be able to deal with in a year or two. These debts and obligations that we have, as I said, have been building up for quite some time, and it's going to take some time to get us back on the right track.
Do you think that's a good idea, Governor Florio? The state is bound to balance a budget at the end of each fiscal year. But is it a good idea to maybe look out and in terms of a 5-year or a 10-year plan?
Well, of course. I mean, transportation is an interesting area. The Transportation Trust Fund is designed to improve our transportation facilities in the state. What we have, though, is that the fund has no money in it. All the money that's coming into it now is being used to pay off old bonds, because every time we pass a bond issue with no source behind it, all you're doing is accumulating more debt. So we have a situation now where someone's got to figure out how you're going to float the next bond with money behind it, because if you don't do that, you're just making it worse.
Can the legislature and the executive branch, can they work together in this and come up with real solutions?
That's the problem we see today, is that the partisanship is so deep and is getting more and more bitter, that everything is analyzed through that partisan prism rather than the policy prism. And we have got to, as citizens, have got to say, look, we want you to step back. We've got to solve this problem. Put a honestly bipartisan commission together. Sit down quietly outside of the limelight. Don't talk to the press. Just sit down and take a good, hard look at where we need to go as a state. We need to ensure that the people that we elect are willing to work across the lines, party lines, and that's been a problem. We have seen more and more this inclination. We have lost what Margaret Chase Smith referred to as the distinction between the principle of compromise and the compromise of principle. We need to remember that there's a vast difference there, and you can find common ground without compromising principle.
A lot of planning and strategizing ahead on behalf of the state and solving these very complicated and important problems for New Jersey. Governors, thank you very much for sharing your perspectives.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.